Hello, and welcome back to Thriving Together. This is our podcast for individuals that are parenting with a chronic illness. You are here today with Holly
And,
and
and Jenna.
and we are so glad that you are here today. We're going to kick off our favorite question of are we thriving or surviving today? How about you, Jenna?
I'd say I'm thriving now. Full transparency, this is our back-to-back episode. We just did one on flaring and parenting while flaring, which was a really great episode, and we hope you enjoy it. So I'd say now I'm thriving. Earlier I was surviving, but I'm feeling a lot better now. What about yourself?
I am still thriving. I think every time we gather in this space and we are part of this community, I just feel really energized. And I'm really excited for today's episode. We're going to shift a little bit to our past has been kind of focused on what are some of those practical tips for thriving through parenting. And today we're going to dig a little bit into the mental wellness side. And we're going to be talking about the concept of grief, especially as we have become parents.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this topic. I think it'll be really interesting to dive into each of the stages and kind of give some examples of how we've went through that or what we've seen in those stages. So
Absolutely. So, to kind of kick us off, I'm going to start by kind of describing some of the terms that we might be talking about. And so today we're going to be talking about grief. Grief, we often think about it in the traditional sense of the experience of sadness and loss that we can feel when something physically leaves us. So this could be the passing of someone, this could be the loss of something physical. But there's also another term called living grief. And this is to help describe some of those scenarios where maybe we are feeling that sense of loss with something that never actually existed, or maybe it's grief that is associated with the version of someone who no longer is present, even though maybe physically they are still there. This really comes up when we talk about living with a chronic illness, where we may be grieving that healthy version of ourselves. Depending on your age of diagnosis, you might actually have gotten to experience what being healthy was like, being an able bodied individual. And then throughout your illness diagnosis and that journey, you may have times where you feel that sense of grief about that past version of yourself. Or if you are one of us who was diagnosed pretty young, we actually don't have this idea of who this able bodied version of ourselves was, but we still can create that version in our mind. And we are going to talk about this, especially through the lens of becoming parents and what things have come up and what things maybe are still coming up for us.
yeah, I I'm so excited for this. I think it's gonna be so much fun.
Huh. So, with grief, there are five themes. We have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We're going to use the idea of just themes because as we look in the research, it talks about these aren't just like steps that you go through often in a chronological order or you go through it and then you're done. I'm sure we can all think like that would be super great if it was like, okay, check box, on
Yeah,
to
I'm
the
right there
next.
with you.
I'm almost through it and getting through that grief process. But what we know is that it is much more complicated than that. And you can experience several of these all at once. So we're just going to kind of dive in to talk about how we notice these themes show up in our life, in our parenting journey with RA. And we are so looking forward to continuing this conversation on our Instagram or in the comment section and to see how these themes maybe came up for you too and what has resonated. So, if we are ready, we're going to go ahead right into that first one of denial. So, Jenna, tell us, how do you feel denial has shown up for you in the parenting journey?
Yeah, so I would say this would be probably with the conception part of it. Um, as I've mentioned before, I've had a hysterectomy. So that means you don't have a uterus, for those who may not know. And no uterus means there's no baby. There's no chance that that is happening. You have nothing there. There's no chance. I absolutely convinced myself, yeah, I could probably still get pregnant. That's not happening. Absolutely denial.
Yes.
And, it was those moments where I catch myself, I'm like, no, like that's not how this works. Like there's no chance
Yeah.
anymore, and having to kind of process that and work through that again um is always a fun process. But I think, you know it pops up at times I don't usually expect it to, like, you know
Yeah.
just this past week, I think I was saying, earlier, that it's it popped up like, oh man, I could probably, yeah, why can't I get pregnant, or like, why wouldn't this be able to be like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't this be feasible? And it's just, that's not the case.
It's such a natural thought to have when you are on a parenting journey of, oh, well, I could do that. And our thought just goes there. It's automatic. And then there's kind of this like slowly deconstructing that thought where we're like, wait a second, I don't have a uterus. That is medically not possible. But we go there. Our mind kind of jumps there.
Right, and it's just because, like, that's something, like, you're able typically able to do, is like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we preach and preach and preach. Okay, well, especially in like school, like, okay, these are like, this is contraception, this is how you get pregnant, this is like how this
Right.
goes, and then it's, you don't have that anymore, and it's not like I
Yeah.
was going through menopause and that kind of stage of my life, like that wasn't the case. Like, it was this like abrupt
Yeah.
change, and it was like, I have to catch myself sometimes and like, no, that doesn't make sense, that's not logical.
Yeah. It's almost like our brain has already been wired to have some of these thoughts, and we
Yeah.
all are well aware of ticking clocks. And sometimes our mind just goes to this place of like, we should have a baby, even though there might be some factors that really hinder that process or make that process very different.
Right.
For me, denial often came up in the way of saying I didn't want kids. I was fully telling others that I just want to be the cool aunt and I want to travel, and my partner never pressured it and was very like open to it, but also respecting that like this means a pretty substantial burden for you, so you get to decide if you want to take that on. You have my full support either way. And I would just keep telling myself, no, I don't want a kid. It's fine. And then I would be secretly pinning these like nurseries or baby names. And I had the next like four kids named. And it took a while to really admit to myself that I wanted to have kids. It felt so scary to even say. And it felt like I was going to be opening up this like bigger door of what will happen now if I say I do want kids. There was this fear of what if I can't and I disappoint myself? What if it's just a horrible experience? And that really stuck with me for a while during that denial process too.
Yeah, a lot of like my denial with that, and I went through the same thing, like, oh, I definitely, we're not having kids, that's not a thing I
Yeah.
want, like, nope. I think I was like guarding myself, like I did not want to have to feel that disappointment that I eventually did have to feel, like,
Yeah.
and then of course there was the joy when we did go through the adoption process and were able to adopt, but there's like these waves, and I was just trying to protect myself from it, and
Yeah.
I don't know if that was like the right move, but it was a move I made.
I think as we're going through this, and even as Jenna and I are sharing, that there isn't one way to move through this process, but just being able to acknowledge that it's normal to have some denial and to have some of that
Yeah.
pull between, yes, I want this, and I'm really scared to even consider this. We we'll talk about this in a little bit here too, but I think as we grow up with a chronic illness, there's so much grief that we're already kind of doing and constantly having to be adaptable to, okay, that's not going to happen today. We just went through our flare days, right? And there's so much that then we have to just kind of compromise of, yep, we wanted to do that trip to the park today. That's not going to happen. I just accept and have to keep rolling. But when it came to parenting, this is actually where I had a lot of anger. I would look at other couples in our life that were having kids or thinking about having kids, and I would just kind of do this narrative of they don't have to think about it. They don't have to change their medications. They don't have to have these consults with three different specialists to talk about if this is going to be possible. They don't have to weigh out the pros and cons or the ethical kind of burden of like, is it okay for me to have a kid? What if my kid gets arthritis? And all of these heavy thoughts. I just made up this version that other couples just think, let's have a baby. Now we have a baby. Now it's fine. And I know that that's not our true reality, and that many people have the same experiences of struggle or infertility. And I really hold space for that. And in those moments, that's really where my anger showed up. That this was another thing that I felt that arthritis was attempting to take away.
Yeah, I feel that same way. When people around me, and of course I'm excited for them, but I also have these moments where they're announcing their pregnancies, or that they're pregnant, or they're having their showers, and they're getting to tell family. Like, these are such special moments, and they're so exciting, and I feel angry sometimes because it's like I'm never going to get to experience that, and it just feels like that's something that arthritis is taking away from me, that I just don't get to have.
Yeah.
And when in reality I got to have my own special way of doing things. When we had our little guy, I just got to randomly FaceTime people. Be like, oh, look, look at my baby. Um, which was, you know, which was fun in its own way, but I'm never going to get to have those. Here's whoa, look, we're having a baby. And then, oh, look, it's a boy or it's a girl, or it's, here's our shower, things like that. And I feel like I
Yeah.
feel some like anger and resentment towards that, but I often have to remind myself that I got to experience things that others don't get to experience too.
Yeah. It's kind of like sometimes we slide on this spectrum between, being able to accept that this didn't go the way I thought, but I still got to reach my goal and that's fine, or this didn't work out and I have trust that something else is going to work out, and
Yeah.
we can kind of be more on that acceptance. And this so illustrates our topic of grief, right? Is that sometimes we can catch these glimmers of acceptance, and then it's like we spiral back into, these other pieces of, actually, I'm really pissed off that she got to announce her pregnancy. And
Yes.
we just maybe need to check in with ourselves of like, I need to take a little bit of a social media break, or I
Hmm.
need to put some of the filters on so that I'm not consuming that. I need to kind of give myself a moment to recognize that, like, I'm not getting those things and grief is real here. And just really acknowledging, like, gosh, that sucks.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's just the hardest part, is being like, you know what? Yeah, I'm right. Like, this hurts. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't fun, and it's just like kind of learning to accept that that's okay to be like, yeah, you know what? This does suck. Um, and I think as I've worked through it multiple times, like, I've gotten better each time with being like, okay, you know what? Yeah, this
Yeah.
does stink, and I get to sit in this right now and feel how I want to feel about it.
Yeah. Really just even labeling, oh, there's that anger again, knowing
Hmm.
that we are going to bounce to these other pieces, but here's where these parts are. And it's okay that we sometimes have moments of anger or the denial. And now we'll kind of shift into our bargaining. Bargaining is kind of an interesting term. This is where a person may have thoughts or act in ways to almost kind of reach this unrealistic expectation. So for me, bargaining always really shows up with this nearly magical thinking of if I just am very compliant with my treatment plan, I'm going to be in remission. I'm going to be fine. Or
Yeah.
if I start taking fish oil, it will probably be great. And reality is, my condition's a little bit more complex. I'm not going to be ever able to reverse the fact that I have two total hip replacements. That's not realistic.
No.
But I have this thought of like, if I just do the exercise plan, or if I add in this new diet, or if I take this new supplement, it's going to be great.
I'm laughing because I absolutely did the same thing. I decided, I was like, oh, to get pregnant, I just need to go dairy and gluten free. I'll get pregnant. Like, I read a study on it and I was like, sold. And
Yeah.
I completely believed it for until I couldn't have the pasta I wanted. Then that changed. But I
Yes.
probably stuck to it for a solid 2 days, and I was really proud of that. I bought two
Absolutely.
cookbooks.
Oh gosh, yes. I think because this is such a vulnerable experience,
Yeah.
we are so open to like what is going to be the thing that helps me not feel this way. When you are doing the testing, if you're in the trying to conceive phase, I'm going to be a bit specific there, is that you're doing these testing and maybe you're tracking the ovulation, or maybe it is just like taking that pregnancy test. And when you see that negative, even if you're like, I know it's going to be negative, that drop back into disappointment is so painful every
Yeah.
time.
It
And
is.
to like do this cycle of like, okay, disappointment, but maybe, but maybe, but maybe, feeling really hopeful. If you're like me, you're imagining a whole bunch of different symptoms where you're like, wow, I feel irritated. Maybe it's because I'm pregnant. Wow,
Yeah.
I feel nauseous. Maybe it's because I'm pregnant.
It's just the methotrexate.
It's just a methotrexate. We're tired
Every
because we
time.
have arthritis. And also, we take that test and we drop back down. And so when we see if you take this tea, that might be helpful. If you do this diet, that might be helpful. And all like holds some space of like, it's true, it might be helpful for some people,
Yeah.
but not for all. It's not a magical fix. But bargaining really is about this stage of magical thinking of I have this thought, and if I just do this thing, then I don't have to feel so vulnerable and disappointed.
Yeah. It's it always feels like, okay, like you finally are holding some hope for yourself. Like, yeah, this is it. This is gonna be it. And then it's just like
Yeah,
then you have to deal with that disappointment again, and it's just so hard.
yeah. My mind is kind of going towards too that with our journey of arthritis, there's moments of that too, even if we pull this out of context of parenting, right? Like,
Mhm.
I remember times where I was like, well, I just want to try the next aggressive medication because that's going to be the thing that helps. Or I'm going to take the 40 supplements, and maybe I'm even going to validate my grandma's thought of like sloe gin and raisins help cure her arthritis. And so maybe I should start that too. And I think it's more complex than that, that it just speaks to the feeling of this doesn't feel good. This isn't where I want to be. And I really want to get out of this stage.
Yeah. It's it's just it's hard.
It
It's
is
hard.
so hard. Yeah. And as we kind of look at this, we can already feel kind of that heaviness of our next stage of depression. And I want to be kind of clear that depression, as we talk about it right now, is not a clinical depression, but this is the feeling of depression. So for me personally, this is where I get stuck if I start to think about all of the different ways that my child may be affected by me. And in these scenarios, I absolutely make up the worst way that this could go. I think of what is it going to be like when we have that kindergarten field trip to the zoo and I have to hold us back to sit down because I need a break? Or how embarrassed is she going to feel when somebody says, "Why is your mom so short?" And I know we are mostly virtual, but if you've listened to our other podcasts, I think I've mentioned it before. I'm about 4'10", which is the size of most children. And children are curious people. They're going to ask these questions. And I put my projected feeling in there of she's going to be so embarrassed because that's actually my shame. That's actually my depressed feeling of this is something that she is going to have to navigate in the future, and I should somehow have been able to protect her from that.
Yeah, I feel that same way. I It typically shows that way for me as well. If I just want to protect my little one every way that I can, and the thought that eventually people are going to probably pick up on it when we're at a soccer game or if we're at an event, or you know, I don't know how I'll handle that. I like, we've talked before. I handle it better with kids than probably some grown-ups, because kids are just curious. Um,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to be in leg braces soon, so it comes up to about your calf, and it's a metal plate under your foot just to make sure you're getting clearance when you're walking. And I know that my little guy is gonna absolutely be like tapping on the back of it, like, "Oh, what's this?" One to understand. And I'm not ready for him to have to do that or have to try to even understand why, because I feel like he shouldn't have to understand. But that's just not the reality of the situation.
Yeah. There's that automatic thought that somehow having arthritis or whatever chronic illness, whatever limit that you have, makes us a less than parent.
Yeah.
It somehow makes us not the right parent. But that's a false thought. That it is true that our littles are going to have questions, and they're allowed to have some of those questions because it is their reality of having a parent with a chronic condition. But it doesn't make us a less than parent. We are always the just right parent for your child. Sometimes, as we look at that acceptance piece, this looks like being able to acknowledge that I'm still a good parent. I have arthritis, but that is one part of me. And I am able to still be the just right parent.
Yeah. I don't have much to say there because it just hits. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah. Right? And we're
our
still
child are
in
going to
it.
be. We are, and our children are going to be okay. And I see that now. He doesn't know any different, and I'm not doing anything that's going to harm him or put him in,
Yeah.
you know, it's not going to cause issues down the line. Like, I am still a present parent. We still sing songs and we still play and we still do all
Yeah.
these things. It just might look a little different, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think of too that when I think about my daughter, I want her to understand that what being a human is not just this like really narrow box of humans have to look this way, act this way. Then I actually am glad that she is just growing up with this already expanded understanding of human diversity and different abilities. And I, just as I can project this negative view of like how my illness may one day affect her, I also can project an equal positive reality where maybe she will be someone who treats everyone with baseline respect.
Right.
Maybe she will be someone who is able to be a strong advocate for maybe the kid in her class when she's in kindergarten or in her life in a workplace in the future, that this is something that is teaching her empathy and understanding of diversity and is not something that is going to be just a burden to her.
Right. Like, can almost guarantee my child will be an inclusive child. Like,
Yeah.
there's the things that he gets to witness, or the people that we surround ourselves with, we surround him with. Like, we are a diverse group of people that have different abilities and are able to do different things and do things a little differently. And I know that I can at least say that my illness is going to make him a kinder person.
Yeah. I like that really hits for me of just like when you think about your kid and I think of all of these like hopes that I have for her, it's not that like I want her to be this profession or, this relationship style. It is, I want her to be kind. I
Yeah.
want her to be inclusive. I want my child to be the one that stands up if there's bullying. And that is something so beautiful that, like, having me as a parent is nurturing that. We're actually nurturing all of these values for our kid. And that really is helpful as we are still going through that grief process. And as our kid gets older, we're going to continue to go through that. Absolutely. She will have moments where she maybe is going through her own grief process and expressing anger or bargaining Mom, I'm pretty sure if we just do yoga, you won't have a flare day again. And
Yeah.
she's allowed to go through that process too. And the more that honestly I gather in communities like this where I'm intentional with talking and being aware of where I am in my grief, that helps me take care of my stuff, which helps me not project that and be reactive in those situations where the little kid says, "Hey, why are you so short?" or "Why are you walking like a robot?" That I'm able to just be present with that, and
Mhm.
that is really something that we're still working on when it comes to grief.
And that's okay.
Yeah. It's all a journey together, and we are so glad that you are all here with us. And we want to thank you guys for all being a part of this journey. And I hope that there are pieces of today's episode that really resonated with you. And if Jenna and I could ask one thing from the community that has already gathered here is to go ahead and just give this video, or if you're on one of the podcast streaming platforms, to please share. We're really wanting to build this community and to reach others that are feeling alone too. This is such a interesting intersection between having a chronic illness and the vulnerabilities of being a parent. And so we hope that you're able to share this with the community that you have built around you. If anything has resonated, if you have feedback for us, you can always send us a DM. We would love to see that 5-star review if you could take a moment to do that. That really helps us as we are growing this platform. And as we are signing off, if there are any concerns, we want to make sure that you are encouraged to seek out your medical professional or mental health professional if you have any concerns there. We are really encouraging you all to gather with us in the future as we continue to figure out how to thrive together.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.